Thank you.
So our next panelist and the speaker, which is the final one, actually, third and the final, is Steven Knaggs, the claims manager of West of England P&I Club. Dear Steven, welcome again. Thank you very much for being a part of this webinar. Lately, we have received so many questions from ship owners and other parties in the sector about the new survey arrangements during pandemic period and concerns about the availability of surveyors and correspondents during this process. We will be more than happy to hear the new arrangements, if any, from you as the first hand.
Sure. Well, thank you very much. Hoş geldiniz, everybody, or welcome to those who speak English. Firstly, there are sort of three areas I want to touch on. There are how this pandemic has affected the club conducting their own surveys, how it's affecting our members doing precautionary surveys and other surveys, and just general third-party assistance provided by correspondents and other parties. So they're the areas we're going to touch on. I don't always like talking about myself, but I will just introduce myself and why I might be the right person to talk about this. Not only am I a claims handler, but I am the club's correspondent manager. So a lot of the problems that our members have been having have been fed through myself. And certainly 2 months ago, it was quite a busy time as we all adapted to what was going on. Things have, however, calmed down a bit, which we'll talk about in a bit. So how has the club, and well, talking about the West of England, but I think all the clubs generally work in a very similar way. Well, talking about what surveys the clubs do, we'll talk about entry surveys, condition surveys, and follow-up surveys post incident. So it's patch cover surveys, that sort of thing. Now, before the virus, go back to 2019, it was very straightforward. We used trusted people that we relied upon. And we worked with the owners to find a suitable time and place to do the surveys. Now, when the outbreak started, the problem was, well, not many people knew what they were able to do. Surveyors probably were told they were in lockdown. They weren't able to get into the ports. The ports weren't really sure how to operate and let people in. So it was a bit chaotic to begin with. But as I said, things have calmed down. Now, from our club perspective, we sort of have a three-stage attack in terms of conducting surveys. We try and do it, business as usual. It isn't business as usual, though, because we aren't able to work as well, trying to get the people we want, trying to get the surveys in the places that we want them to do. And the schedules of owners are a little bit more, shall we say, fluid, because they don't really know what might happen when they move from port to port. So we have to work as well we can. We are using different surveyors, which creates opportunity for a lot of new companies out there. And it's just a bit more difficult planning thing, but we are trying to operate, in a normal way. If that doesn't work, we've started trialing doing remote surveys, more desktop-based surveys, mainly on newer ships and ships where we don't think there is going to be a problem. We would request certain documents from owners, historical documents, maybe ask the crew to do a walk around with a video, that sort of thing. This, as I say, something we are trialing, but so far so good, but we have only done one or two of them. Now the third, if that doesn't work or not possible, then to use an English phrase, we just kick the can down the street, down the road, and we'll defer surveys until a more convenient time in the future. So that's how the club has adapted to doing their surveys. But we move on to sort of how owners and the surveys that they are required or we need to undertake on their behalf. And one of the main ones that comes up is precautionary surveys. Now, unfortunately, from the West perspective, you still need to do your precautionary surveys. So your steel products, We need to check the cargo beforehand to protect cover.
Mhm.
The pandemic, unfortunately, isn't an excuse not to do your surveys. But we understand, as I say, certainly at the outset, in the early part of this year, some surveyors weren't available, or some surveyors couldn't get access to certain ports. Now, our experience suggests that, well, we have moved now. It is likely you will be able to get a surveyor. You might not, a bit like the clubs, might not get the surveyor that you normally use if you're doing regular trade to certain points. But there will be some surveyors available. That's what we have found, and we are able to help you make arrangements. But if surveyor attendance isn't possible, and we have come across this even before the pandemic in places, remote Russian ports, for example, there is ways that we can work around this. And in particular, we can work with the crew. It's an extra burden on the crew, unfortunately, but we can work with the crew and the master to try and survey the cargo remotely. But we need to know about this beforehand. You know, notify your club if you're having a problem, and we can work together to sort it out. It's no good loading the cargo and leaving the port and then telling us, oh, sorry, we weren't able to get a precautionary survey. We need to know in advance. Well, what else can you do? Well, you should look at your contracts. I'm not going to step on Joanna's toes and talk too much about charter parties, but within the charter party, say you are loading steel products, there is normally clauses talking about voyage charters, particularly saying that the master can reject certain cargoes. We need to make sure that the master is actually able to do that. And so we need support for the master in these difficult times to say, no, we're not loading that cargo. And sometimes there's a lot of pressure from the shippers to say, no, please put it on. So we just need to make sure that there are provisions in the charter party that allow the master to effectively do the job and help protect the clubs and the members. And the third one we mentioned, or Joanna mentioned, letters of indemnity. So you could think about inserting into your charter party a clause whereby if precautionary surveys aren't available for whatever reason, then the charterers must give the owners an indemnity for any claims. But Joanna did mention about the problems of letters of undertaking, and that's a whole different seminar to talk about that. But one problem we have noticed, and I've put that at the bottom of the slide, is damage surveys. Now, if you arrive at a port to discharge and there is a problem, it's okay if we can access the vessel in situ on the port. But if that cargo is going off to different places, different countries sometime, there are border issues there. So it's difficult to then see the cargo at its final resting place. And if we're talking, say, grain cargoes or something that requires a bit of a specialism, we might in the past have sent someone, well, an expert, either from London or anywhere else in the world, to go and look at this cargo. That's not possible anymore at the moment, certainly due to travel restrictions. So we are reliant more on local expertise or remote surveys jointly with, say, London-based experts working with the local surveyors. So there has been a change there. This might be a good thing in the future. Yeah. It's local expertise. It might reduce the costs. It might be better for the environment, less surveyors flying around the world. But we have seen that is still a problem, and it will continue as long as travel restrictions go on. Now, moving on to third party and correspondent assistance. It was very difficult to begin with, as I said, in sort of January, February time. But most countries have acknowledged that they need to keep the ports open. And a lot of correspondents have been quite active in making the local authorities understand that ports need to be open. They need to be able to gain access. We are part of the big shipping cog, and we need to keep things moving along. And through the relationships that they have built over the years, they have generally maintained or contact and access to the ports. As I said, it wasn't the case to begin with, because there was a bit of, well, we're not sure what we are allowed to do. But now, generally speaking, access is okay. And as more countries relax their lockdown strategies, then it should get even easier. But I mentioned it in the last slide about the more reliance on local networks. So we would have perhaps sent an international expert out. We are relying on local people, and the correspondents have been vital in identifying who those people are. And I do think, I mean, sort of jumping into the next slide a little bit before this one, but the future, there's a great opportunity here for local correspondents and surveyors to really take advantage of the opportunities they are getting. So generally now, correspondents have access, surveyors have access, but there are a few areas of concern. And that is medical assistance to crew for non-COVID related injuries, and stowaway disembarkation. Now, countries generally now do not want to take people. They will, more or less, there are a few anomalies, but there are more or less, they will accept crew injuries, they will get them off, they will do what they need to do, which is the right thing to do. But they are quite keen to get them back on board after they've had their treatment, which is odd, because before this, they were quite keen to keep hold of them because they can make money out of them by keeping them in hospital. But now they are trying to get them off quickly, which creates a bit of a problem, because it means that the ship might have to stay in situ until the treatment has been done. And we've seen that problem in Chinese ports recently, and our club has seen it in Gibraltar as well. Now, that's the crew. Stowaways, no one wants them anyway. And now it's become even more of a problem. So correspondents have to play a key role here in using their network and working with the authorities to make sure that that authority does the right thing and takes the stowaways off, because it is still a problem. But for owners, it is a bit of a nightmare at the moment. We have seen ships moving from country to country trying to get the stowaways off. And another problem that I've identified from a couple of cases I've worked on is all the court systems are closed. If you require help from the court, you can't get it. Now, this could be a good thing if you're trying to avoid being arrested, because it might be a bit more difficult. But if you want to use the judicial system yourself as an owner, i.e. to get the cargo off or to put it into to storage to exercise a lien, if that is the local law, then it might be very difficult to do that. And that will only change when the court systems open up, but that won't happen too soon.
It's the same in Turkey, actually. All the courts are closed, so any procedure or legal step is not possible to take at this process now until further notice.
It's around the world, this problem, and the issue is there will be a backlog. So when the courts do reopen, it's going to be a
congestion and everything.
Absolute nightmare. But my last slide really is a bit of, well, what happens next? It's sort of looking into the future and how COVID-19 will affect our practices in the future. And I'm not a fortune teller, so I don't know what the answer is. But these are just two articles that were in Tradewinds this week. And you've got class societies saying that they are going to change the way, or have to change the way they operate in the future. And then you have big companies in New York saying, well, we are going to be looking at the way that we operate. Now, that company, that's very much an office-based job. And I think practices in offices will change a little bit. We've all shown that we are capable of working from our homes. But shipping is a bit different and still requires a hands-on approach. We can talk about doing desktop surveys for cargo, for ships, but nothing will be better than someone you trust going on board, having a look and finding out what the problem is. And so I don't think there will be much change in the future in terms of correspondents and surveyors and how they interact with the ships, which I think will be good for the masters to know that they're not going to be on their own. But I do think we'll move away a little bit from international expertise, as I've mentioned before, more use of local experts, certainly whilst the travel restrictions are in place. And there was an article on the news yesterday saying that the airlines think it's going to be 7 years before they are back to pre-COVID levels. So there will be a change, and there will be a change in service, but I think that will be more from the club side and less from the correspondent surveying side. So that's one final slide, I should say. There are a lot of useful resources out there. The IG has a great dashboard, they're calling it, which all the clubs are contributing towards. And you can look at that and look at any port, and it tells you what the crewing arrangements are, what the Medivac situation is, just latest updates in terms of curfew and that. It's a great resource, and it's credit to the IG and all the clubs for pulling together to get that up and running. All of the clubs have their own websites on the outbreak, and then there's the World Health Organization and BIMCO as well. There's a lot of information out there, so if you don't want to give your club a call, then the websites are there for you to use.
Thank you very much, Steven. Actually, I have a small question before you end, because it's more related to your topic actually. Is there any warranties or something that you require from surveyors as club before attending the vessel in relation to the risk of the surveyor attending the vessel contracting to COVID-19 actually, or vice versa? Do you have anything or warranty requested from the surveyor in respect of, or the vice versa, the vessel? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it's very difficult. We do have a visitors pass scheme, but that doesn't really apply. It doesn't apply to surveyors and correspondents. In fact, in the visitors pass itself, it says that they are excluded. But no, we don't ask our surveyors to warrant that they're not going to bring a disease on board.
Yeah,
and vice versa.
It's more like personal, right?
It is, absolutely. But what generally is happening in ports is that the port authority themselves are testing people before they're allowed. They are doing temperature checks. So really, no one should be getting into that port that shows any signs of having the disease. So you would like to think that if a surveyor is going on board a ship, that he isn't a carrier of COVID-19. And equally, through free petite procedures, you would hope that there's no one on board the ship with the problem. So in theory, the two should be okay. I mean, it will slip through the net, so there shouldn't really be a problem or requirement to get such warranties. Yeah,
thanks a lot, Steven. That was my only question. So I got the answer. Thanks a lot. So that was a great speech and the presentation. Thanks a lot for preparing that and also joining us and being a part of this. So we have come to the end of our webinar today. So we hope all of you, our panelists, and the attendees have enjoyed this as much as we did, actually. So special thanks to Jonathan, dear Joanna, and dear Steven for being a part of this webinar and enlightening and informing us and our attendees about so many topics and problems. We would also like to thank to those who attended and joined our webinar today. The record of this webinar will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. So for those who have missed it or who wants to watch it again, which I doubt, but just in case. So it will be on our YouTube channel as well. I'm really happy to see this picture of all three of you in front of me. It was a great pleasure to be on the same platform with you. We really enjoyed it so much, and we thank you again and again for being a part of this. So the final words comes from you, if any.
Thank you so much. The pleasure was definitely ours for giving us this opportunity. It was a great forum. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Indeed. I echo those comments. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks a lot, Steven.
Thank you for being
Thank you,
here
Steven.
today.
Much appreciated.
Thanks a lot, Jonathan, as well. So this one has been recorded, so as you know, so that not to sue us for the records. Take care again, and hopefully these times will pass soon, and we will be together seeing each other in person as well. So
Indeed.
until next time, bye everyone.
Take
Thank
care.
you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.